Hello, welcome to a new episode of Germany in Focus, a podcast made possible by members of The Local. Today we're getting into the latest on the European elections and what we expect from voters in Germany. After devastating floods in southern Germany, we're talking about how regions are coping and the areas most at risk of flooding across the country. How much do you need to earn to qualify for German citizenship? We'll be answering this reader question as many foreign residents prepare their applications. And with the UEFA Euro 2024 tournament just around the corner, we're talking about the host cities and stadiums, and we'll hear from an expert on German football culture. Finally, we'll give our tips on the best drinks to sip on this summer in Germany to keep you hydrated and relaxed. I'm Rachel Loxton, and I'm in Berlin today with journalists Paul Krantz and Burnett. Hello.
Hello.
How are you both this week?
Ooh, I'm pretty great. I had a little trip to a music festival in London this last weekend. Great fun. But being away from Berlin for a bit does always make you grateful for when you return. It reminds you how great this place is when you come down again. So it's a good way to remind yourself leaving and then coming back, weirdly enough. Although the baggage claim at German airports is never nice, but it's a small price to pay. Yeah, there you go.
It's a good welcome back to German life.
Yeah.
Speaking of music, by the way, I this last weekend had my first experience at the Philharmonie. I saw a pianist there. It was pretty nice.
I remember my first experience at the Berlin Philharmonie. It's like you have a different, section of society that you end up going into when you're there, no?
I did feel this way, yeah. I put a blazer on and I was walking through this crowd of well-dressed, well-to-do kind of people. And I was like, wow, I don't see this in Berlin very often in my own lifestyle here.
Yeah, but neither do I precisely, but I always enjoy going as well. It's there's so many amazing cultural offerings here in this city and in this country in general. Get out, get some culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, shall we get on with it?
Yeah.
Okay, it's a big week across the continent because elections for the European Parliament are taking place from June 6th to the 9th. In Germany, EU citizens will go to the polls on Sunday, June the 9th, to help decide who will take up the 720 seats in Parliament. The last time the elections were held was 2019. A lot has changed since then, including the fact the UK is not in the EU anymore. So British citizens, sadly, can't vote unless they've got an EU citizenship as well. We've had a worldwide pandemic and war has really broken out in Europe. So let's look at how things are shaping up in Germany. Aaron, what are the polls telling us right now?
Well, the most recent polls, we have to remember that although when you go to the European elections, you are theoretically supposed to be voting for members of the European Parliament who take up European issues, not national ones, theoretically. Of course, we do see polls where the European numbers in terms of how people are going to vote here don't differ that much from what they decide to do, who they are going to be voting for nationally. Mm-hmm. The most recent polls that we have tell us that the parties of the current German government, so that's the center-left Social Democrats and Greens, and then the Liberal Free Democrats, have lost a lot of support. The FDP is on only about 5% at the moment. The Social Democrats are at near historic lows of 16%. The Greens are just behind them at 13% or so. The center-right CDU really is running away with this contest in Germany, at least. There are many other facets to the European elections that are going on in other countries at the same time as Germany is voting, obviously. They are on around 30%, depending on the poll that you end up looking at. Could be a little bit of give and take there, but that's pretty stable there. And the far-right AfD, Alternative for Germany, their poll numbers are crashing.
Really? Because the AfD really were doing pretty well recently.
They were.
Why are they losing support? Do we have an idea?
Well, the AfD are on, in the last poll that we have, 15.5% or so. Now, that's a big fall down from the 23% that they had registered only in January. That's only about 4 months ago, and they have lost literally a third of their potential voters between then Berlin now. So I spoke to Kai Arzheimer. He is a political scientist at the University of Mainz, and he specializes in the far right. You'll find that article where I speak to him in our show notes, by the way. Now, he tells me that there's a few possible explanations, and it's hard to say which one is at play the most here, or whether they're all kind of fairly balanced. One is the deportation scandal. Now, that happened back in January, where we saw AfD members attend a secret meeting with neo-Nazi figures, and they discussed mass deportations of people who they believe hadn't assimilated into German life enough. Now, this included plans to deport immigrants who possibly had even taken up German citizenship since then, if they had not assimilated enough by their definition. At the time, this meeting happened near Berlin, and at the time, some politicians even took to calling it a new Wannsee conference after the meeting of the Nazis in 1942. So that's one possible reason, is the backlash out of that. Another is the number of scandals they've had lately. We've had recent episodes where we discussed the fact that a top aide of European Parliament candidate Maximilian Krah, who is a member of the European Parliament at the moment and the top candidate for the AfD, or was in this particular, for this last particular election, that aide was spying for China, and that there were other AfD members of the European Parliament who had taken Russian money. So a lot of different scandals swirling around there. And another reason is that some of these voters have migrated to BSV, or BSW, that is Sarah Wagenknecht's fringe pro-Russian movement. And those are made up mostly of former left party MPs, but they're taking a few of those extreme fringe votes there.
Really interesting. And just to complicate matters, there are a number of district elections taking place in Thuringia, I believe, some runoff elections. So these are separate to the EU elections, but we're going to be watching closely to see how the likes of the AfD do there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you bring up Thuringia in particular, that does tend to be a part of Germany where the AfD tends to do better. So it will be interesting to see what the difference is between how well they do there and how well they do in Germany as a whole when it comes to the European elections. And I think we might also perhaps even expect that the AfD might do a little bit worse in the European elections than they would nationally, because remember that EU citizens who, are themselves a type of immigrant, are, even though they don't need a residence permit to live here, are eligible to vote in these elections if they live in Germany, of course.
Right. Do we have an idea of which party is likely to get the most votes in Germany? And what does that actually mean? So how will this translate to the European Parliament in the elections?
Right. So Germany is a single constituency with a national list. So it's a pretty straightforward proportional representation system for European elections. And the center-right CDU is really likely to get the most votes. As I've said a couple of times, they're really running away with this. They're on 31% of the vote in polls, depending on which one you're looking at. Now, that is twice as many as the second-place Social Democrats. And that's actually almost the same amount as the three current governing parties are expected to get combined, that they will take by themselves. So their lead is extremely convincing, and that will boost the center-right group in the European Parliament. That's the European People's Party, of which the CDU is a member. That also just so happens to be where European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen hails from. She also hails from the German CDU. So a strong showing from the CDU here will make it strengthen her case for another term as European Commission President.
And by the way, it's worth mentioning that beyond these major parties that are more likely to win most of the seats in this election, there are quite a few smaller parties running in Germany.
That's right.
So there's actually a total of 34 political parties in Germany running in this election, which as an American is just mind-boggling to me.
Wait, you don't have that many?
We have like two parties.
Really? And on the actual ballot paper?
There's actually a handful of there's maybe like five or six parties in the States, but two that matter, right?
This reminds me, just to forewarn anyone who's going to be voting in these upcoming European parliamentary elections, perhaps for the first time. Last time I voted in 2019 in the European Parliament elections, my ballot paper, I held it right up and it spilled all the way to the floor. It was like a scroll that just spilled all the way. And, there was this, I had to fold this paper so many times to put it in the envelope to be able to vote. So just so you know, it's a big piece of paper.
Right.
Which it has to be because, as we're saying, there's that many parties on the ballot. I was taking a look today at some of Germany's newest parties because there's quite a few parties on the ballot this time that they didn't even exist last time there was an election in 2019. And there are some interesting choices there. So, for example, there's Germany's V3 party, for example. This is basically a vegetarian and vegan party. There's also the Last Generation, which is the controversial climate action group that's best known for throwing soup at art and also blocking roads in Germany. They actually have candidates running in this election. There's a Turkish pro-immigrant Dava party, as well as a couple populist parties, including one that advocates for Germany leaving the EU. A little bit ironic in my mind to run for an EU election and then your whole platform is like, get Germany out of here.
I mean, that is what happened in the UK, I'm afraid.
Yeah, don't talk to me about it.
And that's what they're doing. They're totally advocating for a Dexit, if you will.
Yeah.
Which
not a very popular policy here, though.
Not a popular opinion.
Yeah. The campaigning period has been going on for a while here. Have you guys seen all you can't have missed all the posters on
They're impossible
lampposts.
to miss, yeah.
They're on almost every lamppost, just these kind of like little posters. I found them very uninspiring this year. Do you guys like them?
I have lots of problems with the posters this year, with maybe one like very clear exception. And I'm just going to say I'm not revealing my political preferences here. All I'm doing is assessing people's poster games. That's all I'm doing. But if we look at Volts, I think they have some pretty clever ones. Of course, there was one called, directly translated from German, "Don't be an asshole." So that was one. There was one where they said, "We want more ice," which of course plays on the fact that EIS in German can mean either ice cream or like actual ice. And, they mean that to mean ice flows up in the Arctic, because of the impact of climate change. So quite a play there on words. But otherwise, there's just a lot of face.
Yes.
Right?
They just give face.
Yeah,
that's
do.
The main thing. Just a massive face on a poster. And you're like, what is this telling me about this party?
Yeah, what's
and
the
party
message?
colors?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of Sarah Wagenknecht everywhere, I would say. She is really getting her team working for her.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, there isn't much that's on the poster a lot of the time, other than face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also an exciting election for young Germans. People as young as 16 will be allowed to vote for the first time in these EU elections.
That's right.
If they do vote.
Yeah. And I mean, interestingly, like every country that you vote in, even though it's a European election, sets its own rules about who is allowed to vote. So you might have a 16-year-old EU national from another country who isn't able to vote at home but can, in fact, vote here. If they, of course, live here. You must be an official resident of Germany, registered, and an EU citizen to be able to vote.
What about the bigger picture across Europe then? What are we expecting from that?
Now, as we've been talking about already, we're likely to see a strong center-right showing in Germany. That's not necessarily going to be the same of the rest of Europe. We are seeing increasing numbers of far-right MEPs have strong poll showings and quite likely will be elected in greater numbers. Marine Le Pen in France and Giorgia Meloni in Italy. The big question here is whether the two of those women and their various right-wing factions will team up. If they did so, they would probably or quite possibly have the second largest bloc, just based on how polling is now. But that's a big if. We don't really know if they will do that yet or not. We are going to see a rightward shift. How far to the right? That is the big question of this election.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that update, Aaron. And with that, anyone voting on Sunday, have a good one and good luck. Let's move on. It's been a devastating week for communities in southern Germany because of continuous rain and thunderstorms that have resulted in deadly floods. Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg have been badly hit, with many residents having to be evacuated from their homes. There's huge disruption to travel, and also some people have lost their lives. This comes after extreme floods that took place in Saarland and Rhineland-Palatinate earlier last month. Paul, what is the situation at the moment? Is the cleanup underway, or is there still immediate danger as we're recording on the Wednesday?
Yeah, it's both really for now. According to the latest updates we've seen, again, this is as of Wednesday early afternoon, there is still immediate danger in some areas, specifically in Passau and the surrounding region on the Danube River. Water levels are still high enough that major parts of that city are flooded, and other cities nearby. But heavy rain in the region has largely stopped. So in most areas, floodwaters are receding or have receded already, and cleanup efforts have begun. Top of mind, of course, for rescue workers is an ongoing search for missing persons. Again, as of Wednesday, at least 5 people have died, but rescue workers are still searching for other missing persons, including one firefighter that disappeared after a rescue boat capsized in Swabia. And that follows the death of another firefighter who had been in another boat that capsized earlier over the weekend. One kind of wild success story we've heard is that this 32-year-old woman was found and rescued after she spent 52 hours in a tree that she had climbed to escape the floodwaters. Yeah, sounds rough, but she's safe and sound now. Another bit of good news is that nuclear waste storage facilities in Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg are reportedly fine. They've been spared from the flood damages. Apparently, there was some concern that floodwaters could potentially affect those facilities. But as efforts slowly shift from emergency response to cleanup, the extent of the damage here is becoming more and more clear, and it's going to be expensive. We've already heard from some municipal leaders that funding for flood damages, or putting aside prevention measures, has really been inadequate. And State Premier Markus Söder has promised that this money will be delivered quickly and unbureaucratically. But I think it's going to be a couple of days before we really see the extent of the full damage across the whole southern part of this country and how much it's really going to cost, both in terms of city and state infrastructure as well as private property damage.
Yeah, and the pictures and video are just so shocking to see. Passau just completely underwater almost. So we have seen some really terrible flooding incidents recently. And of course, there was the flood disaster in summer 2021 in parts of Western Germany, which killed nearly 200 people. Are German districts and cities generally prepared for flooding?
I think the short answer is no, not really. At least not for particularly large floods like that we saw in 2021 or that we're now seeing. Flood mitigation is really quite a colossal problem, and it's not one that can always be easily fixed with simple measures like creating a better drainage system or building higher dams, for example. It really takes kind of both of these approaches and more, and some bigger changes, systemic changes that take a long time to implement. So, for example, in modern history, we've largely tried to confine and control waterways. For example, feeding rivers into canals, really building up their sides with cement, building dams and levees. And increasingly, experts are saying that this really isn't effective because basically these things can actually make the problem worse when the water levels get so high that this infrastructure fails. So on a city planning level, the idea of urban sponge projects has gained a lot of traction in recent years. This is basically the idea of deconstructing some of the pavement in our cities, creating more green spaces and green roofs. And this would allow soil to absorb more of the falling rain instead of kind of immediately shoving it off where it drains into the streets and the sewer systems. But these kinds of projects ultimately amount to a pretty huge infrastructure change. And ultimately, I think, unfortunately, it's easier to begin these kinds of projects after damage has already been done rather than preemptively. So, of course, in the current moment, it seems pretty obvious that we need more flood protections across Germany, but we'll see in the coming months if that really translates to enough funding and continued effort going forward.
Are there any particular parts of Germany that are really at risk of floods?
Yeah, I think we can take a cue from where we've seen floods in recent years. So the area around the Ahr River in North Rhine-Westphalia that was hit by these 2021 floods, that is one region that can be flood prone. Also, good chunk of southern Germany. So basically where we're seeing flooding now is flood prone, or at least historically has seen these 100-year floods, which are becoming more common. And I did speak to an insurance representative from Alliance on the topic of flood insurance, who specifically called out Passau a few days before the flooding there was really big to me, saying this is a region where a lot of it's hard to offer flood insurance to homes. They can't really afford to cover these damages anymore.
Chancellor Olaf Scholz said during his visit to some of the flood regions earlier this week that climate change couldn't be ignored. Is flooding something that experts believe we are seeing more of in Germany as an effect of climate change?
Absolutely. Scientists have been warning for years that climate change doesn't just mean warmer temperatures. It really means a more inhospitable climate overall with greater extremes. And what we're seeing now in Germany in terms of weather patterns really aligns with that kind of climate impact, where the country is seeing less rain overall in the summer, but also far too much rain in these quick bursts, which leads to flooding. Regarding storms like this one, the basic function is that warmer air and warmer ocean temperatures allow more water to be picked up into the atmosphere from places like the Mediterranean. And then when these clouds move over land into Europe, they eventually drop all of that water. And another factor I've heard climate scientists mention is that climate change is affecting global wind currents. So it's actually documented that climate change is slowing down wind currents over Europe, for example. And that means that when these heavy rain storms move through, they're moving slower. So they're dropping more rain in one place. Whereas in the past, they would usually kind of distribute that rain over a greater region. And we saw this as recently as last year with these really strong floods in Greece and southern Europe as well. Basically, the takeaway here is that climate change is expected to make floods both more powerful and more common. And in Germany, we often hear these floods, as I mentioned earlier, called 100-year floods. And that's because historically in these regions, there were known to be these huge, devastating flooding events, but it would be expected maybe once in a century. Whereas now, I mean, just in the past couple of years, we've seen a couple of these 100-year floods in Germany. And there were a few more even just within the last couple of decades. So in my mind, it's this term of 100-year flood is already quite outdated because basically with climate change, a 100-year flood is becoming a every few years flood.
Thanks so much for those updates, Paul. Okay, let's move on and look at a question that some of our listeners and readers are thinking about ahead of the German citizenship law change later this month. How much do you actually need to earn to qualify for citizenship? Is there an exact amount, or does it depend on your individual situation? Aaron, these are good questions. What can you tell us about it?
So, unfortunately, the ever so German answer here is it depends.
Great.
I know, yeah. Sorry, we can't give you there really is no hard or fast rule here that we can give. And that really is so that the authorities can exercise some judgment over whether they think you make enough to not be a burden on the state. Very loose rule, it would be €1,500 a month for a single person is generally considered enough to live on, even if that's a bit tight. But they might expect a little bit more from you if you have a family, for example. But also, they might take into account where you live. Do you live in an expensive city like Munich, or do you live in a cheaper one like Leipzig? If you live in a cheaper one like Leipzig and you make a little less, then, that will definitely be taken into account during your application. So it's all very relative that way.
Right. So it very much depends on if you have dependents, where you live, maybe even on the officer involved, because I guess they're giving their judgment on the situation.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, right? There is some discretion involved. €1,500 a month is kind of like a guideline, but it's definitely not the be all and end all.
Does it matter what kind of job you have?
No, you're pretty good in most fields with respect to type of job, that kind of thing. But your odds are definitely better if you are in stable work and you have passed your 6-month probationary period, for example. If you're still in that when you are looking to apply for citizenship, it might be an idea for you to wait if you only have a couple months left of it, for example, because then you're really in a much stronger position.
Good to know. And just to recap, what is the situation if you have claimed benefits? Is that a hurdle to applying for citizenship?
Well, it depends on how long ago you claimed them. If you've claimed them within the last 2 years, then yeah, that could be an issue for your application. If you've been here for 10 years and you have had a totally stable job for the last 5 years, and maybe 5 years ago you did kind of claim benefits once upon a time, but now you don't anymore and haven't for a while, you're probably good to go.
Yeah, and it does depend on the benefits, right? It's unemployment insurance is fine, but maybe if it's long-term unemployment, Bürgergeld, that's more of an issue.
Yeah, those are the real sticking points. But something like getting Kindergeld, for example, when you child's allowance, that is completely fine. Or, for example, if you are getting parental leave or basic benefits like that, that is typically fine as well.
Good to know. Thank you for that, Aaron. Right, we're counting down the days until the UEFA Euro 2024 Championship starts in Germany. The month-long tournament kicks off on June the 14th in Munich when Germany plays Scotland. We're going to hear about German football culture soon from author Kit Holden, but let's do a quick recap first. Paul, which cities are involved?
So Euro 2024 games will take place in the major arenas in 10 German cities. Those cities being Berlin, Munich, Dortmund, Stuttgart, Hamburg, Düsseldorf, Cologne, Frankfurt, Leipzig, and Gelsenkirchen.
Gelsenkirchen.
Is that your favorite place?
Well, no, not exactly, but it is my grandmother's ancestral home. So there you go.
Cute.
It is a favorite place. Let's put it that way.
Paul, do you have a couple of cool facts to share with us about any of the host stadiums?
Well, we can add to this that Aaron's grandma comes from Gelsenkirchen.
Yeah.
That's a fun fact for that
there
city.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
So regarding the rest of the arenas, unsurprisingly, a lot of Germany's major stadiums originally date back to either the early 20th century, or quite a few of them were built or completed under the Nazi regime. So Berlin's Olympiastadion is the most obvious example here, which was constructed specifically for the 1936 Olympic Games, which were infamously hosted by Germany.
Controversial, yeah. The stadium itself.
Yeah, exactly. And those games were attended by Hitler himself. Another interesting example was Stuttgart's arena, which was originally opened in 1933 and originally named for Hitler.
Wait, it was called Hitler?
It was called the Adolf Hitler Arena. Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, they changed the name.
Yeah. Oh, good.
they changed the name and they renovated Olympiastadion in Berlin. So there you go. Couple of changes.
So another World War II related fact, Dortmund Stadium was evacuated when a 550-pound undetonated bomb was found under its parking area as recently as 2015.
Ooh.
But they were able to get that out of there and the games have gone on. In terms of modern technical feats, I was surprised to learn that the field in Gelsenkirchen's stadium can literally be moved in and out of the arena.
Oh, wow.
So they've got all this grass and it's on these platforms that are supported by this 11,000-ton structure. And it can just move the field in and out of the stadium. It takes 4 hours, apparently. And I guess this is so the grass can grow in normal conditions outside in the sun, but also so they can move it out of the way when they have Taylor Swift concerts, for example.
Excellent.
Love this. We will definitely include a link to your article on that, Paul, so we can find out more facts.
And how to get to the stadiums in question. Good logistical info there in the show notes.
Let's hear now from British-German author Kit Holden, who has just published a new book called Played in Germany, A Footballing Journey Through a Nation's Soul. Kit is also a sports journalist writing for publications including the Tagesspiegel, and his previous book is called Scheiße, We're Going Up, The Unexpected Rise of Berlin's Rebel Football Club, about FC Union. I asked Kit, what does football mean to Germany?
I guess, first and foremost, football is by far and away the biggest sport in Germany, and it's almost more than a sport. The kind of, particularly in the last 20 years or so, become a massive, if not the main thing in German pop culture. And there's no other sport that gets close, and there's few other parts of mainstream German life that really interest so many people and bring so many people together from so many different sort of backgrounds in Germany. So that's one thing, which is kind of a common thing anyway for football in a European country. So I guess with Germany as well, and sort of partly one of the things I touch on in the book is kind of, in some ways, football is sort of, at least it's a way of tracing the kind of post-war story of Germany, because, if you look at some of the sort of biggest moments in German football history, they often come at quite fateful moments. So Germany win the World Cup in 1954, which is just the start of the economic miracle and the period of reconstruction and rebuilding. And there's a lot of historicization of that World Cup final as quite an important moment in the sort of early years of the Federal Republic. And then the third World Cup win comes in 1990, just around the time that just after the wall has come down and German reunification is about to happen. And then you have the World Cup in 2006 that they host, which is kind of seen as a kind of watershed moment for German society in terms of diversity and inclusion, but also in terms of its relationship to national identity. So there's sort of a way that you can use football. And I mean, that's just, one example of it, the story of the national team in World Cups, but you can use football to kind of trace German history to a certain extent, or at least kind of it offers a window into something beyond just the game itself.
You travelled throughout the country to research the book. You spoke to fans and visited stadiums. Was there anything that really stuck out for you or surprised you?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, it's sort of funny because part of the point of the book was to sort of shine a light on the diversity of regions and regional identities that there are in Germany. There are different dialects across the country. There are different cuisines. There are literally different histories. And, the different regions of Germany look to different neighbours. Obviously, Germany has so many different neighbouring countries. And so culturally, there are very different influences depending on where you are in the country. Yeah, in many ways, everywhere I went, I'd ask people, what makes your region special? And they'd be like, well, we have this type of sausage and this type of beer. It's like, yeah, okay, well, they said that down the road too. But everywhere does have its sort of unique flavour. And I mean, one of the kind of most striking images, I guess, I had from a reporting trip was in Munich, where went to 1860 Munich, who were kind of the smaller team in Munich after Bayern, obviously the dominant force in German football. An 1860 current old team who have fans across Bavaria, even though they're quite small. And there are these old guys who get bussed in from, wherever it is, Ulm or Passau or wherever it is in Bavaria or Swabia outside of Munich. And they bus in their sort of big groups from their local community to watch 1860 to come to the home game. And most of them are kind of, pensioner age. And in order a lot of them to fund these bus trips, they bring their own produce. So if you go to a Zextis game, you have these kind of old boys standing outside their buses, having brought their big like oil things of Leberkäse and they're selling it on the street outside. And it's, when you do get that sort of thing in football stadiums elsewhere, but it was one of the most German images I've ever seen in my life. And yeah, I think that kind of thing of like live fan culture and it sort of mattering to communities you see kind of replicated everywhere. And yeah, it's that diversity is really cool to see.
And as you mentioned, there's regional diversity in Germany. But what are some of the things that you might say characterize a German football fan, maybe that are different or similar to fans across the world?
Germany has some of the highest attendances and some of the most famous fan culture in Europe. And that it's not for nothing that fans from across Europe come to Germany to kind of see that and experience it. And it's cheap, and you can, as you said, you can drink and smoke on the terraces. And, even if you go to a big game like big club like Bayern or Dortmund, it's, you can still get in cheap. You can still it still feels like the kind of vibe that you would have at Tennis Borussia or wherever, but just, multiplied by 10,000 or whatever. And I think that is quite unique because in other countries, in other European countries, the kind of football going experience has become very sanitized and commercialized. And then you couple that, I think the thing that really marks out German fans is a kind of political consciousness and an idea that, they are resisting in various different ways, whether that's about, specific single issues that they protest, or whether it's about kind of more ideological thing about maintaining the governance structures that exist in German football.
Kate, let me ask you about the Euros, because Germany is, of course, hosting Euro 2024. It starts later this month. What are 3 things that you expect to happen as our football expert right now?
I mean, picking a winner is very difficult. As a Wales and Germany fan, I wake up in a cold sweat every morning at the moment, imagining England lifting the trophy in Berlin, because I just can't imagine how horrible that will feel. But I feel it might happen because they do look good and they're one of 3 or 4 teams who plausibly could win it. Probably Germany are now in there too. France are definitely in there. So, I mean, it's very hard to pick. I think a lot will just be decided on form on the day and who gets injured and how the draw pans out and things like that. So yeah, I can't really say who's going to win. But I mean, one thing I do expect is there's going to be some kind of big organizational hoo-ha, which the German press get very upset about, whether that's the trains not working or something happening at the stadium. And I think a lot of people are holding their breath to kind of see whether that's going to be something really, really fundamental that doesn't work, or whether it's just going to be a few little slip-ups here and there. Because I think a lot of people are really hoping that this tournament goes off without a shot. And then, yeah, I guess we'll see with the German national team themselves. They seem to be in a better place than they were 6 months ago. If you'd asked me 6 months ago, I would have said I'm expecting them to be knocked out in one of the first 2 rounds because they were looking in very, very poor shape.
And do you have some advice for anyone who's really trying to get to the heart of understanding football culture in Germany and what it tells us about Germany?
Yeah, I think almost all ordinary fans have some kind of attachment to football, which goes beyond just being like, that's my team and I want them to win, and come out very quickly when you are there in a ground and are talking to people, because it does matter to people a lot, and they are invariably very, very proud of their team and their region and want to chat to you. And yeah, I think that's the best way in, really, is to go to a game, because that's where you see everything. You see the kind of, the polished product and high quality football and all the rest of it, but you see the warts and all and the kind of amazing centric and lovely characters that are around you in the stands. And yeah, I think that is the soul of the game, and it's the place where German football has managed to preserve something slightly different and slightly unique in European football is on the terraces and on the stands. So yeah, go to a game. It's cheap.
Thank you so much, Kit.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Before we end our episode today, let's talk about what to drink in the summer in Germany. It's certainly getting into lounging about outside season, right?
Yeah.
What are the best ways to cool down, get hydrated, and relax and chill out? So I'm going to start us off with my suggestion, and that is Schorle.
Ooh, good choice.
Yeah. So honestly, Germans love adding fizzy water to things. And the classic is Apfelschorle. You can have lots of others, but Apfelschorle is the classic. This is apple juice and Sprudelwasser, or sparkling water. This is a nice way to get a little juice hit, but it's still kind of healthy and hydrating. And I really hope the wine enthusiasts can forgive me for this, but Germans also really love a Weißweinschorle, which is a white wine spritzer. So white wine and sparkling water. Not every place does a good job of this, though. My tip is that it should be really chilled. So ideally get some ice cubes in it as well. And the wine and water should be just really like in the fridge, chilled. So for me, it's quite a good thing because you can pace yourself. You're not consuming so much alcohol and you're just getting a lot of water as well. But I feel like people who love wine might find this offensive.
Yeah. I mean, just go for the good wine.
Exactly.
But I mean, I have to say, I do absolutely adore Apfelschorle in particular. And I miss it when I'm out of the country. Like if I go on a trip or if I go to Canada for a visit or whatever, I miss some good Apfelschorle.
A cider doesn't do it for you?
No, you gotta have the proper Schorle. For me, though, my favorite also, when I feel like having a little bit of alcohol there would be a refreshing German Riesling, particularly if it's from the Pfalz or the Moselle. Also, if you order directly from those wineries, for example, I have a couple that I've been on tour to that I really, really like to order from when I can. It's just a great thing to have when it's chilled in the fridge and you take it with either to a picnic or you have it on your back deck or something like that. It basically just screams German summer.
Personally, I'm a huge fan of Radler, which for anyone who doesn't know.
Yeah, I mean, there you go. It's a classic, isn't it?
It's a classic.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, this is basically a light beer mixed with a lemon soda. And according to a local legend, Radler was invented by an innkeeper who had this inn near Munich. And he was running his inn on a hot summer day, and he was just overrun by these biker gangs. I mean, like gangs, groups of bicyclists, biking social clubs.
You mean motorbike?
A cyclist?
No, cyclist. Cyclist social clubs. This was like 1922. I don't know if biker gangs were around in that sense back then. But anyway, he was absolutely overrun by thousands of cyclists one day, and he began running out of beer, which would have been a travesty in Germany.
Yes.
And so he began just cutting the beer with this lemon soda that he apparently had overstocked.
Oh, to kind of lengthen the beer stores.
To make sure everybody gets some.
Yeah.
And this is, as legend has it, the origin of Radler.
Oh, wow.
But personally, I was introduced to this drink on my first trip to Europe, actually. I was 18 and I came to Austria with my dad, and I had some Radler, and I just loved it because I do like some beer, but I also, as a young man, was more prone to liking sweet drinks, and the combination of these two was like eye-opening to me. And I went back to America and couldn't find it. And I was like, what?
So you had to come back to Germany to enjoy your Radler, right?
I thought like this, yes. But I would say since then, the export of Radler seems to have taken off.
Oh.
I think in America, you can find it now. But yeah, Germany really does it best.
Delicious. Okay, thank you so much for that, guys. That's it for this week. Thank you so much to all our listeners. As always, we will add the links in the show notes to the stories we've been talking about today. And please leave a rating or a review and hit follow wherever you listen to your podcasts. This week's panelists have been Paul Krantz and Aaron Burnett. We also heard from author Kit Holden, and our sound engineer is Rhys Edwards. We are taking a 1-week break next week, but we will be back the week after. I'm Rachel Loxton. We hope you enjoyed listening. See you in a couple of weeks. Until then, take care.